Hello, who are you and what do you do?
I'm Gil Yehuda. I run open source at Yahoo.
And where are we today?
We are at NASA,
Yeah,
the Ames Research Center in Mountain View.
yeah. I'll take a quick look over here at the gigantic dirigible hangar over there. Is that
Yeah,
a blimp hangar? We
the
call it
blimp,
that?
yeah.
Okay. So we're actually been here talking about open source at the NASA Open Source Summit,
hmm
and you of course do open source for Yahoo these
Yes, I
days.
do. Yes, I do.
So what are some of your key takeaways from this?
Open source is still really great. Everyone loves open source. Most everyone loves open source. It is a generally good thing, but it is yet a hard thing. And the folks here at NASA are struggling with making sure that they're doing open source in a way that fits with the way they do technology. They're ridiculously brilliant people here that are working on the most amazing things, and yet they're encumbered by processes. And open source doesn't make everything easier for them, and that's a challenge. So that's what I'm hearing.
What are the key pain points you've heard here?
Key pain points. They struggle with licenses, and many open source groups struggle with licenses because there's some confusion. There's different licenses. At NASA, they have their own license that they created many years ago, NOSA, and that's been a problem for them because it's largely incompatible with other open source licenses. It's largely unknown, and that's a challenge. In addition, there's a process issue with just getting software out the door. So if they want to contribute code to some other project, even something as simple as a patch, they go through a lot of steps in ensuring that they can do so. Normally, a good thing to go through the steps to ensure you can do so. They have to go through so many more steps than the folks that I manage at Yahoo have to go through, that it was daunting, and it causes them to not be able to or not want to participate in the open source community, and thus shutting them out from a lot of the value that they really want to get to. A lot of it is based on policy. Most of that policy is probably good, and I bet some of that policy could probably use a little bit of rethinking.
Okay. So, what were some of the solutions or some of the insights that people share that might help to address some of those issues and the other ones raised?
So one of the things that we spoke about in one of the breakout sessions had to do with getting an effective feedback loop with respect to how policies are created and who they impact. As it turns out, in large hierarchical organizations that have been around for a while, like the government, you have a group of people who make the policies and then a group of people who are affected by the policies, and the two never meet. In fact, the people who make the policies largely don't know what the people who do actually do. They grab the policies from some other place where it may have been applicable or not, and then they put them together, they write them, and then they're cast in stone. And what would be really cool is if you've seen that TV show Undercover Boss or something like that, if the people who are making the decisions would have real visibility, and if they reached out, I think that they would learn a lot about the reality. And similarly, if the people who are most affected by the policies would have the forum, the ability to provide the feedback, to know that the feedback was being heard, to see the feedback being put into play, and then the cultural dynamics around being allowed to give feedback without being labeled as a complainer, and really rewarded for improving the process, then you would have a much more effective policy to process marriage. In many ways, policy in the world of government is a barrier to doing the good things that they want to do. And I think that's just thinking about policy wrong. Policy is a service, and if the policy isn't providing service to the process, then it needs to be maybe bad policy.
How does open source fit in this larger movement of open government or so-called government 2.0?
Okay, so I see government 2.0 or open government in two dimensions. There's the internal openness that needs to happen, breaking down some of the bureaucracy that is within departments or within government branches. Then there's government openness on the outside, the transparency that citizens, taxpayers, deserve to see what the government is doing with their money in many cases. It's my belief that you need to do the internal kind of before you do the external many times. If you just do an external transparency gig and you haven't fixed anything on the inside, then you've turned all the walls into glass and everyone can see how messy the room is. So probably a good idea to break down some of the silos and bureaucracy internally so that when you go external, you can see all the good work that's being done. In reality, you kind of have to do both and take the opportunity where you have them. Where this fits in is that NASA, as this just tremendous resource and asset to the country, has an opportunity to be yet even more open. They engage in education. They inspire our children. They certainly do. But they can also inspire our technologists in providing information, science, data, code for things that are valuable in the commercial space and in the consumer space. And similarly, they can take advantage of some of the great innovation that we have that can help their missions. There's an opportunity there. They're being encumbered by policy, process, legality, and things that should be enabling their protection, and they're actually disabling their participation. And I think that's what we've been focusing on for the past 2 days, helping them get their heads around what's working for them and what isn't, and maybe inspiring them to go back to the drawing board in some cases.
Right. Well, Gil, thanks for taking a moment, and I look forward to seeing you online. I understand you tweet at GB Yehuda.
Not GB. That's Gadi Ben Yehuda. It's another guy.
Wrong one.
Yeah. G Yehuda. GYEHUDA. That's where I tweet and blog and all those other nice things.
I've been hanging out with Gotti in Washington too much, clearly.
Okay.
All right. Thanks so much, Gil.
Sure.